There's lots going on these days in the world of SEO with AI and algorithm updates and all that, but it's time to really hit the ground running and get back to Project Charity. So today we are going through a process that I have had a lot of people on this channel ask me to show more of here on YouTube, and I'm about to show you way more than we've ever done publicly, and that is our process for search analysis. Search analysis is our approach to what most people call keyword research. We're coming up with the topics for the website. So you might be wondering, why are we standing at a blackboard instead of at a computer? That's because the first step of search analysis is actually what we typically call the brand plan. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this niche of off-roading and we're gonna break it down into kind of logical categories. This is like how we are internally just gonna structure the content on the website to help us come up with the right topics and group them appropriately so we can build topical authority. So first things first, we need to talk about how we could take this niche and slice it. And I can think of a few different ways. The first one is kind of the most obvious, I think, or at least to me, this is the first one I thought of, and that's kind of different vehicle types.
Yeah. You know, we've talked about some ideas for the different vehicle types we have. Another idea that we could do, there's a lot of general information in the off-road world. And so I don't know exactly what we could call that, but I think like maintenance might fall under there, you know, different things like that, that might just be kind of general, not necessarily vehicle specific, but that could be another way to cut it. We could write all these ideas up on the board and then we can kind of go from there.
Sounds good. we didn't write on the same line. That's okay. At a high level, right? Like ATVs, dirt bikes, side-by-sides, mini bikes, SUVs. Really, like this could be the first way you look at it, is like buying vehicles, recovering your vehicle when you get it stuck, modifying it, maintaining it, using it, and like general safety. And then we have legal and insurance. The thing that makes the most sense to me would be to first kind of break it into, because like the activities I do on an ATV are gonna be different than a dirt bike, right? So a lot's gonna vary. So I probably would break it apart by those, and then under each one of these probably have these as either subcategories in WordPress, again, I don't care, or just topically, like in my search analysis, when I look at ATVs, I'm gonna look at buying them, I'm gonna look at modifying them, maintaining them, etc. Do we think like the legal, insurance, all that stuff, does that one differ depending on the vehicle?
There's probably gonna be very minor differences.
This could potentially be a subcategory that is maybe part of a general category. So we might have a general category that includes this. It could include some safety with off-roading. It's probably a good idea to keep kind of like a safety kit, like obviously some first aid stuff, but like, what if you get stuck and you don't have phone service? You know, do you have like a thermal blanket? Do you have maybe a radio? Mods are gonna vary a lot.
Significant.
Depending on the vehicle, even depending on the specific, like which side-by-side you get, it could impact it. Most of these are gonna fall as subgroupings.
Yes, I agree.
So then the next step is, we only get to pick 3 subgroups. And I'm not talking about 3 subgroups that we get under all of them. I'm talking about 3 subgroups total. It would make sense then to try to start with something that we know is probably going to have some search volume and where the competition's not like crazy. For search volume, one of the things I like to do is this. I'm actually going to share my screen here. I did bring a computer to this party. So here I am in Google Trends, and I'm just going to search one of these vehicle types, ATV, and I'm going to pick the topic of all-terrain vehicles. I'm going to expand this to 5 years. I don't mind that geography is the United States because that's where off-roading is going to be the most popular anyway. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare this to one of the other vehicles. So I'll do dirt bike as a topic. ATV, all-terrain vehicle, in general, seems a lot higher. Now that's everything, not just off-roading topics. And maybe that makes sense because like people use ATVs like on the farm and stuff too. What about side-by-side vehicle? Okay, it's in there. It's a little higher than dirt bike right now. That doesn't surprise me. Wow, they all picked up in April 2020.
Interesting.
Everybody got outside,
Yeah.
apparently,
Wonder what was
especially
going
up here in the Northwest. We saw this out in the mountains. Like, we'd go up to our property and there would just be like campers everywhere because people.
You'd even go to the
We're
dealerships
stuck.
for stuff like this,
It's
and they were
sold out.
wiped. There was nothing out there, so that makes
We should have
sense.
started this one a few years
Yeah.
ago. Mini bikes. So it's there. It's lower than dirt biking, but it's there. And so what we're doing is we're kind of getting the relative search volume,
Yeah.
right? So consistently over time. And we're noticing that the trend is higher now than it was 5 years ago. It's not going anywhere. If anything, it'll level back off where it used to be.
Can we take a look under SUV? We've talked about a couple different vehicles.
So if I just do like SUVs as a vehicle class, it's pretty huge. But if we pick a specific, so like Jeeps, Jeep, maybe even just Jeep Wrangler. It's a pretty common off-road vehicle.
Popular.
The Jeep Wrangler
Still
is,
pretty big.
is as popular as all-terrain vehicle.
Yeah.
One I really like is the Toyota 4Runner. So it's right up here as a really popular option. What about like the FJ Cruiser? All right, it's down there with the mini bikes.
Okay.
So it's a little bit more niche. This exercise has a lot of value. One, we've kind of mapped out where we could go eventually. We've also just uncovered so much possibility with this niche that for us to cover all of this ever, it's just not really thinkable, right? There are whole websites about Jeep Wranglers, right? And YouTube channels and stuff. Like, there's no way we're gonna cover off-roading in its entirety. So I think it makes the most sense to start where it fits the best for us, as well as we talked about that search volume and competition. So for search volume, ATVs seems like a good option. Also, ATVs would be fairly inexpensive to really get into. It wouldn't be complicated or cost a ton of money. And a lot of our riders are gonna have experience with ATVs, and so it's gonna be a lot easier to be able to just start creating content. So maybe for the first vehicle type we pick, we go with something like that.
Kind of like you said, without a little bit of outsourcing that we're going to do, I think that it makes sense that this topic is something that a lot of people around here or that our writers could potentially have experience with. So we're going to end up with better quality content just because, if we go with SUVs, our writers probably don't all have SUVs, they're college students. So I think
especially because under SUV, we would probably pick a more specific vehicle.
So I think ATV is probably a good place to start.
In search analysis, one of the principles we talk about is the inverted pyramid. And that is basically like, there's some questions that anybody that's interested in ATVs is gonna ask this question at some point. And then as we move down the pyramid, there are those questions that only your like avid ATV rider, maybe like those that do competitions and stuff, only those people are gonna ask.
Yeah, I think this one is, wide.
Buying is always
everyone's going to
base of
have
the
to be looking
pyramid.
at that. But if we're talking about mods, that's something where you're probably getting into a little bit more serious.
Yeah.
You're not just buying an ATV.
Like you've already bought one,
Yeah,
probably.
and now you're going to spend extra money to do upgrades on various things. So this was probably more closer to the tip of the period in comparison to buying anyway.
Yeah, totally.
And I think something that we've been talking about recently is like content or topics that could be potentially subjective.
Yeah.
There's a lot more value there as somebody.
bloggers, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
for bloggers, there's a lot more value for me writing something that's potentially slightly subjective. It sets us up to potentially be more valuable later down the road as competition comes into the niche.
So an AI can answer the question, how much does this particular model of ATV weigh?
Right.
It can't answer, is this one better than this one?
Exactly.
Not in a good way because it can't think for itself. It can
Yep.
only say what bloggers have said.
Yep.
So this seems like a good one from a search volume standpoint.
Yep.
So ATV buying.
I think let's go with
Okay.
that. It's a good place to start.
I'd love to do at least one more general category. We talked about legal and insurance potentially being more broad. There's a lot of questions around like street legality of stuff. There's also what are the registration requirements? And then there's where you can ride kind of questions. That's all kind of legal, and that's actually different even clusters of content.
Given the timeline for this site, it would not be a bad idea to prep some content in something where there's some obvious monetization.
Yeah.
I know that's a little bit early. I don't want to jump the gun
totally.
here, but since we are, we want this site on a faster timeline, kind of just thinking ahead and preparing so that's not a bad idea. And while some of those queries or topics might be a little more to the tip of the pyramid, it's not necessarily bad if it's just a piece of it.
See, mods is like awesome. It's huge. This will do well with ads because it shows
Yes.
buyer intent, and so ad revenue will do okay. But maintenance, there's going to be some affiliate products, but this is closer to the base of the pyramid. If we did maintenance, we could even start with content that's like getting your ATV ready, like in the spring. Because right now we're in the middle of the winter. People have already put it away for the winter.
Right.
And so we could start with content knowing that it's
kind of prepped to potentially write.
Yeah, why don't we go ahead and do maintenance? And then I could see us doing, what if we start with just like insurance? Maybe that's gonna be too narrow to be like a whole category, especially if we focus on ATV insurance.
Right. Might end up being a small cluster.
Right.
But
it's a starting point, and within a month or so, we'll probably be able to branch out. The danger with going with just ATV everything is we don't get to test out multiple vehicles and see what works and get our own data very quickly. But it also gives us more topical authority on ATVs from the beginning. So it's a trade-off, but I think we'll pretty quickly get to a second vehicle type.
It's just content production. So once we've chosen our clusters here, so now we need to go through, do some serious research into it to see if these are real, like legitimately good ideas. But then once we do that and we get our search analysis prepped, as soon as we can get these articles written, reviewed, prepped and ready to go on the site, at that point we can potentially move on to other vehicle types. So the sooner we get to it, the better.
Now that we have 3 specific subcategories of topics for this website, at least to get started with, we can get working on the actual search analysis. So let me just show you a little bit how this process is going to go. You're actually going to get to see my screen here. This is our search analysis tool. This is in Airtable. We have it in Google Sheets version. Project 24 members, you've got this. The other thing that we're going to use is here within the Google Sheets version of the blogging tool, we have this partial search assistant, and this is going to help us come up with partial Google searches. I'm going to open up another browser. This is one where I'm never logged in, and we're going to use this one for Google. So not signed in, don't really have a search history here. These are the categories and subcategories. So choosing and buying ATVs, maintenance within ATVs, as well as just in the general off-roading category, insurance. The purpose of the partial search assistant is to come up with some partial searches that we can type into Google to see what people are actually looking for. Now, a lot of people are going to use a keyword research tool for this. This is the process we use because it's free, for one, and for two, because if everybody's using the same tools, then they're going down kind of the same list of ideas of search queries, and they're all coming up with the same topics. And the search volume numbers of the keyword research tools they're wrong. So let's find some specific search queries people are actually looking for within this topic. So here, the general topic, let's just say ATV, right? This is going to give me a bunch of partial search queries. Down here is a noun or a concept, a person involved in the niche. So, a cyclist in bicycling or whatever. An action phrase, verb or action phrase ending in ing. So like buying an ATV. So some of these are going to make sense and some are not for the particular thing that I typed in. So we're just going to go with the ones that make sense. How to choose an ATV. Now that's an entire query, not a partial, but let's go ahead and type that in and just see what Google gives us. So, people have written articles like this, right? The complete guide to buying an ATV four-wheeler. I might actually go look at some of these articles and see what specific things they mention, because those might give me ideas of other queries people are looking for. But here's what I'm actually looking for. What I'm looking at is the people also ask. I'm going to type in a query, or generally a partial query, and Google's going to tell me right here, these are things people are actually asking that are related to the thing that you asked. So here, what size quad is right for me? Okay, that could apply to an ATV. In the article, I'll probably use all of the different ways to talk about ATVs, call them four-wheelers, call them ATVs, just to make it clear to Google they're all the same thing. So in choosing and buying, I'm going to put here as this is the very first query, what size ATV is right for me? What about what's the best ATV for the money? That's a good one too. Honestly, what's the best ATV for the money? I feel like that could actually lead to a whole cluster of content, because I could answer a lot of different questions around that, because it depends, again, more on your usage than on the money. And so I could write an article about what's the best workhorse ATV for the money? What's the best hunting ATV for the money? And on and on and on. What brand of ATV is best? These are kind of obvious questions, but they're ones we're going to want to make sure we cover, because if we don't ever cover these on our website, then it's going to be hard to have topical authority. So even if I'm not going to rank for those immediately, I want to cover those. Here's another cool tip. I can open one of these and then I can close it. And look, there's a whole bunch of new questions, and I can open it and close it again. It's going to give me more. Over time, it's going to start to get further and further afield. So we're only going to do this a few times. Oh, that's kind of cool. What's the best month to buy an ATV? I'm going to come down here to the ing one because a lot of these are more of the partial search, and these can be super powerful. Can buying an ATV? That's just a partial question. So I'm going to type that in. Let's see what Google comes up with for the people also ask. Are ATVs a good investment? What do I need to know about buying an ATV? What's the average lifespan? We've kind of seen that. What's a good down payment for an ATV? It's a good question. So we're going to go back to our Airtable. So notice I'm here and I'm seeing this. This is more maintenance, but that's one of my subcategories. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab that. So you can see how in a matter of a few minutes, I've come up with about 10 of these. I'm probably gonna go until I have at least 10 in each one. And really, I want 10 in each one that we're actually gonna write. So I probably want at least 20, possibly even 30 different queries. Now, a lot of these search queries we're going to write an article for, but some of them are going to get grouped together. Some of them we might not focus on first because the competition level is really, really high. Again, we're going to want to write those at some point, but we want to make sure that we're creating some clusters of content where at least some of the specific search queries we're addressing have pretty low competition. The more articles we can rank, the better our site will do overall. Even if they're long tail, if we have a whole bunch of articles ranking on page 1 of Google, it will help the other content do even better. So we want to make sure that we are winning for sure some of these search queries right up front and not just taking a whole bunch of really competitive ones. So the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to show you for a couple of these the next step of how we're going to address the search volume question as well as the competition. So let's start with this first one. What size ATV is right for me? Let's talk about search volume. Now for search volume, we don't look for specific numbers. Yes, I can use a keyword research tool. The number will be wrong. They're not going to take into account other search queries that are semantically equivalent, meaning they mean the same thing, only they use pretty different wording. Some of them try to do that to some extent, but they just can't get it the same way Google does, right? So what we do is we use kind of buckets. Is the search volume going to be high? Meaning, is this a query that's at the base of that inverted pyramid? It's a question that a lot of people are going to ask, even if they're never going to buy an ATV or they're just considering it, right? What size ATV is right for me is probably a base query. The other thing that we have here is if it has full trends data. So I'm going to go to Google Trends. What size ATV is right for me? And we're going to see if there's like any data at all. Notice there's like no data. That's actually really normal for specific search queries because Google Trends does not take into account semantically equivalent terms. However, if I just do what size ATV is right, so we're just going to shorten it a little bit, still nothing. ATV size definitely has. So if I saw that it had full trends data, meaning I have data in all of these, then it means that there are a lot of searches every single month. For Google to be providing me with data for trends, we're probably looking at around 10,000 searches per month or more. I am going to call this a base query, and that means it's probably going to have high search volume. Now let's look at the competition, and here I call this primary competition. There are going to be all sorts of competition, but what does the primary competition look like? The options I have here is like 0. There's like no real competition, at least no articles that are actually really on point for this search query. Low, meaning forums, or maybe they're articles that aren't on point. Forums are often easy to beat, but not always. When people are looking to find out what lots of other people think about a topic, a forum is the perfect search result. So don't just assume forums are low quality content. Google does sometimes put them at the top of the SERP, even though there are articles that are on point. Medium, meaning maybe there's some other blog posts from other bloggers that are kind of on point. High, there's a lot of posts, or there's posts from really well-known sites, or extreme, like it's a government site and it's a very technical question. I will also add in here, if it's a very just fact-based answer, AI is going to become more and more competitive. Whereas if there's some opinion or some subjectivity where your experience can lead you to actually making a helpful recommendation, that's perfect for bloggers. So here what we need to do is we need to actually go do the search. So what size ATV is right for me? Let's go. Okay, so we have a snippet here from superatv.com. We have ATV Man, what size ATV should you buy? Wild ATV, ATV size charts, off-road guide net. So several articles that are on point. I wouldn't say that any of these are necessarily like massive sites. ATV Man, I actually know. We're not going to try to steal his traffic. He's a good guy. But like Super ATV here, let's see. If I look at just the site itself, maybe we can get an idea of just how big this site is. Now, this site feels more like a business than just like an independent blogger, which does make me think that it probably has a lot of content on it and a fair amount of authoritativeness. It looks like you can shop for stuff here. I don't know if they're their own store. but probably. They have a chat bot. I mean, this is a pretty legitimate website, so that's good to know. In terms of from its content standpoint, it looks like it's mostly a place to buy stuff. I'm gonna judge it this way. I'm going to say that it is medium or high, right? Probably several posts. Yeah, we'll call it several posts. So the question is, should you write it? The tool is telling me, yeah, you should write it, but make sure you interlink from related posts. Basically, if I'm gonna write this article, I need it to be a part of a query group. It's recommending I write a staple post because there's a lot of competition. The question as to how long it should be depends a lot more on the topic. This is one where I actually feel like there is a lot to say, so a staple post makes a lot of sense. If I'm having my writers work on it, they're going to spend at least 4 hours working on this. I might even have them spend considerably more than that or write it myself. So that's how this process works. I can go through this for several others, and essentially it can help me prioritize which articles are the lowest competition, most likely to rank quickly, and then we can start by writing those, but make sure that we write a cluster of content around it. Here's the other thing that I'll mention. Let's say if I had more like 30 of these, I could start grouping them, right? So what size is right for me? What brand is best? Mileage is one where it would group really well with questions around buying used ATVs. So I might look for 4 or 5 other questions around used ATVs. So then here under clusters, I'm gonna write buying used. And so I'm going to identify maybe multiple articles that are around buying used. Here I'm going to do financial. It's more of a financial question. It's kind of like how much do they cost? How much is a good down payment? Interest rates? That kind of stuff would be really good to go here. So this one, financial. And this is just gonna be picking the right model and brand and stuff. It helps me easily see which of these articles could easily be interlinked with each other to form a cluster of content. And oftentimes when I create a cluster of content, there's maybe one really central article. And in fact, maybe some of these don't go in a cluster together, as I find more like 30 or 40 different queries just in this subcategory even. What I might do is I might identify that even this should be broken down into smaller clusters. And I end up with 5 or 6 articles in a cluster, and I have maybe a couple of different financial clusters that are even more specific of articles that are really closely aligned with each other. So this is a good starting point. I will go through it and do the search volume and the primary competition portion for every single one of these, and probably spend just a few minutes on each one so that I have a pretty good idea of which clusters are the best ones to start with. And those are the articles we're gonna write first. So in a nutshell, that's search analysis. We actually in Project 24 have a whole bunch of video content going into a lot more depth, but there's your crash course right there. If you enjoyed this video and you wanna know more about Project Charity and what we're doing, we do have a whole playlist that I will put right here, so you can go check it out and you can see from the very beginning, selecting the niche, choosing the domain name for it, obviously this video and every video that we will have about this project going forward. I'm also going to put a page on incomeschool.com at incomeschool.com/projectcharity, where you're gonna be able to see all the work that we've done each month, as well as what the results are that we're seeing. So I'm really excited for you to see that and really to start getting some content on the website. About time, right? Let's get after it. Let's get some work done, get some content written, and make some progress.